This is Inner Healing Paths podcast. Here we discuss the healing of the mind, body, soul, and spirit through a variety of different paths. We have emotional and spiritually minded conversations centering on ancestral healing, psychology, astrology, yoga, meditation, magic, and indigenous spiritual practices of the world. I am your host, Rosa Shetty, and I am so happy you are here. Welcome. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. I am your host, Rosa. Thank you so much for listening. This episode is a little bit different than what I've done in the past. So this is not an interview. This is more of just a conversation between girlfriends. So I had an opportunity to sit with my friend and colleague, Maria Lemus Lopez, and we talk about mental health. We are both mental health clinicians, and we talk about our journey, not just our own personal journey, but how we see the field. We talk about energy healing and curanderismo, and we share our own perspective and opinion on what we see going on social media relating to health and healing. When we planned this out, we jokingly said that this is going to be a comadres session or comadreando session. And comadres is a Spanish word that means friendship, although not quite friendship, but it represents that energy or that dynamic between two people. So we really wanted this to just be an authentic, real, genuine conversation about how we feel. With that said, I do want to provide a brief disclaimer that this episode is not meant to treat or diagnose any physical or mental health condition. It is not meant to substitute for healthcare or mental health services. Guests have a right to share their opinion and perspective, and this does not constitute an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. So without further ado, here is my comadre session with Maria Lemus Lopez. Take a listen. Welcome, Maria, to the podcast.
Thank you, Rosa.
Thank you for being here. So this idea came out from a conversation. We were hanging out at a coffee. It wasn't a coffee shop. Well, we did, right? We started having pizza and then went to Starbucks. And we're thinking of why don't we do like a comadre session where we just talked about everything we just talked about for the last 2 hours.
Yes.
So thank you for the inspiration for comadre session. That's what I'm calling it.
Thank you, Rosa. I do. I appreciate it.
So to get started, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, what do you do, and then we'll go from there.
Yes. So I am currently in Chumash territory. I always like to share that, which is Ventura County. So definitely thank you to the Chumash people of this land. I always like to start by honoring that space. I am actually from Michoacan, so I come from Purépecha territory. That's where I'm originally from. I was actually born over there, brought here when I was 5. One of my roles is a school social worker. So I'm an associate clinical social worker en route to becoming licensed. So I'm just kind of waiting for the BBS to get it together and tell me when I can test. So that's been a very interesting journey in itself on how did I get to become a social worker. I'm a mom to an 8-year-old chiquilla, a wife, a sister, been in the field of social work by choice y de corazón, because I think I became a social worker at a very young age por cosas que I did, you just become sometimes a social worker. And I think we have a lot of social workers out there. So shout out to all the social workers.
Official and unofficial, right?
Official and unofficial, see. And that's that's who I am. I love to advocate for the community. I love working with youth. Definitely my Spanish speaking community. and just learning, I think, in a constant search para aprender. I always say I'm on this road of aprendizaje. Soy sabia sin saber. I don't know if that makes sense. Like I know, but I don't know. So
Mm.
constantly aprendiendo. I think desde chiquilla, my parents, my dad would always say, "You're such a preguntona." And I think that preguntona has led into curiosity. And sometimes it's like, whoa, that's too much. But here we are. So thank you, Rosa, for letting me be here.
Yes, no, thank you for agreeing. So the plan was to have just a chat, right? Where we just talk about different things, and we agreed that we're gonna have a drink because it's Friday night.
Yes.
So cheers. And
Cheers.
what are you drinking?
I have one of those seltzers, those margarita seltzers. I'm taking it slow.
Well, I'm having well, I was gonna make a margarita, but I didn't have any mix anything to make a margarita. So I ended up being I have tequila. So I just made like a paloma with
Oh, nice.
with grapefruit
Dude, that's the
juice and soda.
go-to. That's like,
So
yes.
cheers.
Cheers,
Cheers to you,
Rosa.
Maria, for being on my
Cheers. Thank
podcast.
you. Hmm. Well, it's yummy. I hadn't had one of these in a minute.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get started with our chat. So I know we were kind of going back and forth about what should we talk about, and honestly, I feel that especially when we met, we were just like talking about one thing just after another, and we
Yes.
had our daughters with us, and
Yes.
they were entertained, but they were like, "Okay, we're
Hurry
ready to
up.
go," and we were
Yes.
just chatting away. But I want to start off with just kind of sharing a little bit about how we met, because I think
Yes.
it's so interesting how the the world of social media, and even though there's there's a lot of pros and cons, one of
Mm,
the most beautiful things for me since being on social media has been meeting amazing, wonderful souls, people like you. And so it's one of
same.
my I guess the greatest joys that I've had from being on. And I'm wondering if you want to share a little bit about how you connected with me, or how you found my account, and then how we started talking, and I'll chime in.
Yes. So, dude, back to highlighting what you said, the pros and cons. It's always like a
Yeah.
constant um pelea with me in social media. So there's beautiful things and
Yeah.
So I was starting a journey. I always say a journey. I'm always on a journey of understanding um childhood healing. Like, ¿qué es esto? What do I need to do? What do I need to understand? I had like this espinita of I need to understand that. And so I typed in on the search thing like childhood trauma. And so your link came up, or your, como se dice, your handle came up. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna follow this person.
Yeah.
And then one thing led to the other. And then at that time you were hosting, or you were doing meditations, like live
The
meditations.
inner child meditations, right? Yeah.
See,
Yeah,
and
that was
you know
about
what?
I think 2 years
2
ago.
years ago, y
Mm-hmm.
como around this time, I think, I don't know, because I remember it transitioning into summer somehow. And so I started doing that every night, because you offered it for, I think it was 30 days, Rosa.
It was 21 days. Yeah.
Okay,
I did
21
like a
days.
21-day inner child, sorry, meditation. And we went through different stages of development. And yeah, that was a couple of years
Yes.
ago now. Yeah.
And it was
So
free 99.
yes, it was. And you were actually one of the few that did it with me
The
every
21
day.
days.
Yeah. I mean, a few people would come in and out, or I would see them repeat, but you were one of the few that you were there every day. So I was so thankful to you.
Thank you. No, thank you,
Yeah.
because I'll tell you that opened up a lot of learning for myself. And I was like, why would I not take advantage of this? This is free. And she's doing it. And I'm learning how to meditate, and it's on a topic that I'm interested in. So then you took me through a journey. I think the very last day, I remember sending you an email. I'm like, I went through this weird cathartic crying and I felt like I gave birth to myself.
Yes, I remember you sharing that. That was, I mean, amazing. And yeah,
I'm
yeah,
like, what the hell is this?
yeah,
Obviously, I was doing, the 21 days, but I was also connecting with my own therapist because
yeah.
I wanted to do both of the things at the same time.
Yeah.
Um, just to feel supported because I wasn't gonna be like, hey Rosa, can you give me free therapy? Like, no. So respecting
Yeah.
those boundaries for sure. And I think the way you um supported us through that, and the comfort that I had in connecting with you, and you were always responsive, and it wasn't um it just it felt very genuine, and it felt very supportive, and it wasn't, I didn't feel like a carga asking you the questions. And I think from there, we just connected.
Yeah, I think we started just talking online, and then I think I think it maybe 8 months ago, right? We met up for the first time.
Yes.
No, maybe a little
No,
bit more than that.
no, el
A
año
year,
pasado. Yeah, the a
sometime
year
last
before.
year.
Yes.
Yeah, so we kept in touch, and then we finally met up, and I remember um telling my husband, well, I'm going to meet up with this person I met. Her name's Maria, and we met online. And he was like,
What?
okay,
That was my
okay, you do that.
okay.
But he's used, I think he's used it by now,
Yes. Yeah.
but yes, but you're one of the few. I have to say, I have not met too many or connected in such a way with too many people. Just because, you always, you get a vibe, you get a sense, and from
Yes.
talking to you, I didn't get the sense that we're going to be like you're going to be my client or anything like that. For immediately, it was like, I think I feel like we could be friends.
Yeah.
We
Thank
were,
you,
I think,
Rosa.
we had very similar interests, and then we started connecting a lot on ancestral work, right? Talking about our
Yes.
abuelitas,
Yes.
and I still remember when I think I was doing another meditation, I think later on that year, and I had an owl outside my
Oh,
window.
girl.
Do you remember that? And then
Yes.
you were, or what was it? You were seeing an owl in your
Yes.
meditation
Yes.
prior to an owl coming to near my window, right? And then
And it
you were,
was loud. And I was like,
yes.
does she not hear that? Like, can
No,
she not hear that?
it
Yeah.
was such an eerie thing because it's not common for, first of all, here to hear one so close to the window, first of all. And then I was doing the meditation and I was like, oh my God, this owl is right outside. I was like, I'm just gonna keep going because I can't stop midway. And then you shared with me what you were experiencing, and I was just blown away.
That's why I was like, is that because at first it sounded like it was part of your audio, like if you put, when you play music in the background. And I'm like, no, that's like right. It's gonna come flying in through her window. So I had my eyes closed, but I had to open my eyes because I'm like, wait, am I tripping or is
Yeah.
yes, it
Yeah.
was
So
very clear.
so I think we bonded, connected through a lot of shared interest.
Yes. I would
Yeah.
say the conversations that sometimes you're not always open, they're not I don't want to say open, but they're not always so easy to have, like things that feel very occult, and you're like, I don't know if I want to share that all the
Right,
time.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I'm very, very metaphysical, and I do like a lot of just as a side note, I love listening to paranormal podcasts and ghost stories, and I know that yeah, like you said, not everyone's open to that, or maybe they think is when we talked about this, the devil stuff,
Yes,
or they
yes,
see it as a very dark thing that they want nothing to do. And so as a person that just I enjoy listening to that content. I enjoy, not because I'm going to be talking about or sharing it, with any of my clients or anything like that, but I just, it's, for me, it's just fun. It helps me get my mind off things. But at the same time, I feel like I still feel like people judge about, you know, that
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of misconceptions and stigma around just even curanderismo, which is not even
Oof.
related to that, but even
Yes.
just healing work,
Yes.
energy work, which is not even, we're not even talking about ghost stories, just that Reiki, right? It's just we're talking about
Yes.
very helpful healing modalities that are still looked down upon or judged. So I think that we've been able to go back and forth on things that others would be like, I don't know what you're doing listening to this stuff.
Yes. And I can definitely agree with that, Rosa, because those conversations can either create discomfort or they create curiosity. And I think for me, it's always to come in with the lens of curiosity. You're not saying like, oh, I'm gonna make people do this, and you said I'm not gonna take it to my clients, and I feel the same way. It's just you're being curiosa, you're bringing in that curiosity, um, because you want to know how it was used, or is does it support somebody? And I think I was always walking that curious line of like, well, what is curanderismo? How do you do that? Does someone in my family do that? And then finding spaces or people like you or other people that are open to have those conversations is not always easy. It's, and I can even say it within my own, loving, supportive family. Sometimes it's like, ya vas a empezar. Like it can be very uncomfortable, and I love the leyendas, and I love those stories. um I'm not always into the gore, but I think that the folklore, the folk tales, but
Folklore,
there you,
yes.
yes,
El folclore mexicano de las
yes,
historias de terror, de
yes,
fantasmas.
yes,
I love,
yes,
yeah, I love it. Especially, have you noticed that they're always based in una hacienda?
yes,
Always involving una abuelita, un
yes,
abuelito. O
yes,
decía mi abuela, decía mi abuelo. It's,
yes.
yeah, I love that. Absolutely.
And I think we want to also cultivate that, and we want to nurture that, just like we like to say, oh, como se dice, save all the recipes from the abuela. Well, we can, like, conversating with you, we can also cultivate the leyendas that seem scary, but they're not.
Leyendas, yes, absolutely. And honestly, like looking back in just, to in reflecting what you're saying, to look back to me growing up and having conversations with my grandma, what my dad's mom, she was very mystical and very
Mm,
very much into all this stuff that I'm into. And she would tell me a lot of stories, scary stories, historias de espantos, right? That's what she would call it. But uh now in listening to other people, Mexican podcasters that share stories, I know you shared with me Morras Malditas. That
yes.
podcast is, I love it. It's amazing, and it reminds me of my grandma, and I just see it as a, honestly, for me, it's a way to connect to part of my culture, part of my memories as a child with my grandma, with my
Yes.
abuelita.
Thank you for saying that, Rosa. And my sister, shout out to my sister. She's the one that got me into the morras malditas, because my sister
Yeah,
also likes that type of cuentos, of leyendas. Because like you, we grew up listening to them every time we would visit Mexico, and they would always hear, get in the little bench outside, or the little banquito outside of the door around like 4 a.m. You hear like these people talking, and so for us it's like, oh my god, but then you're so curious, like, what is it, what kind of energy is it, and why is it there? um so yeah, I don't think that's considered brujeria. I don't think that's considered bad, but we've given
yeah,
it that name sometimes.
yeah, absolutely. And I was sharing with you earlier a couple of days ago that I had Atava Garcia.
Yes, yes,
I think I said
yes.
her name wrong.
Atava, yes,
Atava Garcia. She wrote a book called the Curanderismo Toolkit. Do, I think that's what
yes,
it is.
yes.
And And when she came out, we were talking, of course, about curanderismo, but I asked her, how does she differentiate brujeria? Because when I talk to my mom about curanderismo, automatically in her mind, she thinks of brujeria.
Yes, I've heard of this. Yes.
And she shared with me something so interesting that I had never thought about. She told me, or during our podcast, she shared that curanderismo, that term, is relatively a newer term, is something that was coined by a professor in, maybe I think it's New Mexico. He and not too long ago, I mean a couple decades ago, he came up with this term that encompasses all of these healing modalities that he observed from Mexico, uh, which is partera, the what do you call it, midwifery under that. Hierberas, which is the, I get herbalist, right? Hierberas, that would be
Yes. Yes.
an herbalist, a healer, like an energy healer with the limpias that we think of traditionally. But so she was explaining that this term is relatively new. So when I think about my mom and why she associates it with brujeria, is because honestly, like, my mom is not familiar with that term. And I even asked her, I said, Mom, when you were growing up in El Pueblo, she's from a very small town in central Mexico, in Guerrero. I was like, what do they call the people that did the healings, or las señoras que curaban de espanto and all that? And she was like, oh, pues eran las brujas del pueblo. And everybody knew, and so that term curandera is not something that she's familiar with. So when Atava explained a little bit of the history, I was like, oh my God, it makes sense. No wonder it's still very new. And I think as a society, for me, being Mexican American, being here and de aquí, de allá, being, it's like trying to make sense of this, because it is something that fascinates me. It's something that I've incorporated in my own personal healing and journey. Um, so I just thought her sharing in that podcast, that episode is going to come up shortly. But I just thought it was so interesting. I was like, oh, it makes sense. No wonder people are so confusing with brujeria. I don't know. What are your thoughts about that, Maria?
Yes. I'll be honest, I didn't hear the word curanderismo or curanderex or just curandera, curandero in general until I came to the States. Because growing up, no, it was just if you were tenías susto, if you were scared, that got taken care of at home by either your grandma, your tia, or whatnot. I understood more of like a rezadora, a person that prays over you, and uses prayer from Catholicism. That's, que te aprietan, they called it. That's what my grandma would call it. Te vamos a apretar and we're going to pray over you. And so to me that was like, okay, that's what I know. Or but per se we didn't go to a curandera. It just happened very organically at home. And mind you, it was never really my mom. It was always my dad's mom. And then there was a vecina that we knew that did that. That's when we came to the States, and she actually lived with us for a little bit. She would Doña Rosa, she would play, and see, there's like the Doña part. Doña Rosa, she would pray over, I would see her pray over my younger brother, and then she would do like the egg limpia. But you just knew, like, and it was like,
Right.
okay, sure, like
Yeah.
we didn't call him curandera, we said Doña Rosa, kind of like I
Yeah.
said, or my grandma. Shout out to my suegra because she's got strong magic, but she
Mm,
doesn't call herself any of that, and she doesn't
no.
practice.
Mm,
We just know that she can be of support.
she has a gift. Yeah. And so yeah, I think it's so interesting that it in learning, I mean, just going back to my conversation with Atava, you know, she I mean, it sounded that this term is basically the way that Mexican American, because the person that coined this term is Mexican American, or I think he's, yeah, I don't think he's not from Mexico. I think he was born and raised in New Mexico. I forgot the name. She told me the name. I think the last name is I remember the name because he's pretty known. I think he's Torres. I forgot the name. I have to I'll come back. It'll come to me eventually. But basically he's a professor. He's still alive. He's a professor, and that's what he did. Um so as you were talking, I was thinking about, how under curanderismo, even somebody, una sobadora, like when you want to have a baby and you can't, and you go to someone that I did that actually when I wanted to get pregnant with my daughter. I was asking around again, asking around. I mean, I have access. I'm talking about, this is just within the last 5 years. I have access to, of course, social media and all that. But for some reason, I knew that if I was going to find someone, it was going to be through like word of mouth. Like, do you know anyone that does this? And sure enough, someone told me, yes, hay una señora, she's in Pomona, and just you just call her, tell her that so and so sent you. So I called her, and it's so funny because my friend, the one that gave me her info, she was like, she only does it from such time to this time because her husband doesn't like it that she does it. So so I go to her house. She was like, I think it was $20. She didn't even charge me. She's like, lo que me quieras dar, 15, $20. That's it. I was like, okay. So I think, I don't remember, give her a little more. And I was like, oh my God. And I have to say, like, immediately I felt a shift. Just her putting her hand on my, like basically my womb, that area, and just massaging it in a particular way. I will never forget that feeling that I got when she said, okay, yeah. I was like, oh my God. I felt like this sense of, ¿cómo se dice? Like just relief and comfort, and like almost like something I didn't even realize I needed that that rest or that relief. And it was like 5 minutes. It was like 5 minutes. Y ya. And she was like, this should do. And honestly, I got pregnant within 2 months of that. So
That is wild.
yeah, so what I by sharing that, what I mean is that sometimes these people, these healers are out there in the community, and there is no way to know. And if I, for example, my mom is hardcore Christian, like she was all for me doing that. That she doesn't see that as something that is brujeria. But that actually falls under the umbrella of curanderismo, right? So it's, I don't know. I think it's also new, that I think for us, we're still trying to navigate what it means, what it looks like. But I I see it as just healing, like physical, mental healing.
Yes, I agree with that. It's that component of that, what's mind, the spirit, that just your body, and how somatically you're moving. I think most of our gente don't sometimes don't call it the curandero or curandera, but they will. I hear the sobador. Fui a que me sobaran.
Ajá.
Fui a que me
Salvadora.
sacaran,
Mhm.
yeah, a que me sacaran el aire, a que me acomodaran la mollera, which is I don't know how you said in English, the, I don't know, mollera.
Mollera, yeah, is the soft spot that babies have, right?
Yes,
And then as
yes,
they grow, it closes up. I think the
yes,
bone structure there, but initially starts very soft. But yes, and we call it la mollera, that
yes,
specific spot. Yeah.
and you hear that, fue a que le acomodara la mollera, or has aire, or se empachó, and so you get that belly rub, or you do that. You don't go straight into Western medicine, but you go to the sobador and the sobadora, but they're still moving energy. They're still supporting you some way. I think where it gets tricky though is, there's always those sobadores and sobadoras out there that are straight profiting, that are straight doing things they're not supposed to be doing, or
Yeah.
prescribe. And when it's a legit
Yeah.
sobador or sobadora, because no sobador or sobadora is going to prescribe you supplements. They're not going to prescribe you buy
No,
this, buy that.
from them. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's such a tricky thing. And actually in the podcast with Atava, we talked about that because and I don't want to spoil the podcast episode, but she talks about how she feels in regarding charging and for the energetic healing, and she has a lot of conflicting emotions about that. And so definitely check it out. I don't know if I'll release it before this. Maybe I should, right? Since we're talking about her, maybe I should release her episode ahead of this one. But yeah, I think it is. I think it could be dangerous also not know to not really know who you're going to for healing, for treatment. I think there's a lot of abuse of power within, not everyone, of course not everyone, but I've heard stories, right, of folks that trust someone with their healing, and they end up getting re-traumatized, either because they shared so much of their story, their pain, their trauma, and the person just didn't have the capacity or the training, the skills to navigate that. Or also because we're talking about energy at the end of the day, right? We're talking about very complicated energy. So when you open that space to do an energy healing, energy cleanse, like, you have to have the capacity, the training, the skills to deal with whatever comes up. And sometimes it's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be, for me as a therapist, right? I don't do energy work in my therapist sessions, of course, but I'm still dealing with a human being, a spirit, a soul. And when we're working through heavy memories, it's difficult, right? And it's so, I can only imagine when you're involving or opening a spiritual space. I think it's really, really important to know who you're going to. Yeah.
I can definitely attest to that. Yes. I think you listening and seeing what feels safe to your body, I think, um, and what's the intention behind it. With when you go to certain people, I think I've seen it where you're in desperation, and so you go to whoever it is that you think is going to be a support, and then that re-traumatization comes in. Um, I had an experience with myself, and it wasn't a negative experience, but I was going consistently to do like energy limpia or a Reiki session. So I was going. The way it worked through this program, and it was out, and it was a really neat program. It's through our local behavioral health. They're partnered up with an organization, a nonprofit organization here, and so the women there, beautiful women. They do like the Reiki energy. They cleanse you with like hierbitas. They give you a tecito. So I did that, but I came home, and the last day I went into like this really intense cathartic shock, and I knew what was happening. I knew what was happening. My body was releasing. I was feeling all the feels
Hmm.
at the same time, but I knew that. And so me puse a pensar, what about the gente that don't know that that's happening? So then when I spoke to them,
Yeah.
I called them like, hey, this happened to me. Are you guys aware this is happening? And she's like, no, but we appreciate you letting us know. Now we know that it's important to have a clinician on the team to
Oh,
discuss what can happen after doing 4 limpias, and they weren't consecutively, eran como every other 2 weeks. And I'm like, oh crap, like I went into this such a limpia that like my body was like, what the hell's going on? And I knew
yeah,
that. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And that's you with all the training and experience that you have, even, just even as you're a mental health provider yourself,
Yes.
and you have
Yes.
all this information, and still it affects you, right? I think I've shared with you, and I'll share a little bit here. I went to see a shaman a little bit ago, a couple months ago, and same thing. It was a very cathartic. It was I had a release. I was crying. But it wasn't necessarily that a negative in a negative way. I wasn't dysregulated per se. I wasn't overwhelmed emotionally, but it was more of a release. Like the tears were flowing, but I was able to understand what was going on. But with that said, kind of what you shared is it was very intense, right? And you see things as, especially if you, I don't know if anyone has done a shamanic journeying or like it's called a soul retrieval. You go into it goes pretty deep, right? And visually you're seeing things, your mind's eyes giving you images that could be upsetting. And so and for me, even as a therapist myself, it was still a lot to contain and to try to keep it together because I was at home. I was with my with my little one, in the room. So I was like, okay. But even that was hard, right? So like you said, I can't even imagine for folks that don't have the resources, emotional, the emotional resources, the tools to bounce back emotionally from an overwhelming shift of energy, because that's really what we're talking about, right? It's a shift of energy that can be very shocking to your nervous system if you're not expecting it or prepared for it.
Yes. And then going back to, if you're not going to the people that are actually the curanderas, the curanderos, the shamans that can support you, and you're just going to like your local love and light place, and then you're having a cathartic experience, and they're like, pues no sé, like go home. It it's
Yeah.
just it's I think that's why I always have a thing with who gets to call themselves what in the
Mm,
role of 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 healing. Like
yeah.
I've always been told, you do not call yourself that, and until the community will decide, or when you I don't know, I think it just happens very organically.
Yeah, I,
Yeah.
I agree. In talking to some folks, I mean, I've heard from some healers that they didn't do any kind of energy work for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. It's almost like it's not you can't just train or take a class, read a book about it, and then start offering it to people. I feel that there needs to be a little bit more responsibility with, because you're dealing with other humans, right? Life, souls, energy that we need to respect. And I think part of respecting someone else's soul, their energy, is by making sure that we have the training, the capacity to really navigate what could come up, and to do it in a way that is ultimately going to be healing and helpful for that person, for that energy, that soul.
Yes, yes to that, Rosa, because my heart always breaks when I hear, being in the field of mental health. And so, and even though I deal more with youth, but I also connect with the family, so the entire family system. So it breaks my heart when I hear, I went to so and so in the community, um, and I didn't really get supported, but I went to go get a limpia, and I feel like I there wasn't any, it wasn't like a support. Um they left them feeling worse.
Yeah, yeah,
Eh,
that happens so much, so much. um I for me, and I mean, I don't know, what are your thoughts about this, but I have to say that I have a hard time with people that charge thousands of dollars for a service, or even hundreds, a few hundreds, because I don't know, especially for something that we you know, and I think this is my part of my message is that there is a component that, you know, when it comes to healing, when it comes to recovering from trauma, from childhood experiences, or even ancestral generational trauma, there is a component that involves connecting with someone else, a healer, whether it's a therapist, a spiritual leader. There is that relationship that can be very healing. And there's also the aspect of what we do, right? The self-care, the self-healing. And there is that, and it's also huge. It's a huge component of our healing. And a lot of times we first look for others, and then we learn the skills or resources, and then we apply, and within ourselves we're able to do a lot of amazing self-healing work. uh, so I have a hard time with folks, and I'm just gonna say it here, I have a hard time with folks that charge a lot of money for a process, a skill, or a resource that someone can do themselves. You know, like if I if I buy a book for 10, 15 bucks, and I want to heal X, Y, and Z, I don't know, but whatever, spiritually, right? And I learn it from the book and I apply it within myself and it works. Why would then I try to sell it for $500? Right? It's like, wait, why can't we just share with people, like, this is what you can do? Right? There are skills, right? You know, as a therapist, and I know like Reiki and other energy healers that have like this experience and the skill, right? That they should get paid and compensated for their skill. But if it's something, because they're doing it, right? They're giving you the resources, the information. But if it's something that you can do on your own, you know, then why would I pay $500 for someone to do that for me? I think it's that I have a hard time with when people charge a lot of money for something that I ultimately have to do within myself, like a recorded class, or I don't know, you know, like they have these videos like, well, you can buy my class, and you know, it's a series of 10 recorded videos, and this is what you do. It's like, so I'm doing the work, right? I'm doing it on my own. There is no relationship here, right? I'm not paying for a relationship, I'm paying for information. And I think that at this point, you know, information is accessible everywhere. So I have a hard time with that because I feel that so many people, first of all, is not everyone can afford it. And the second of all, it's like, why would you sell over, like upsell, to say something that is so accessible? But because people trust certain names and figures, faces, you know, you trust someone you've been following for a while, you trust them, like they must know something I don't know, and then you give them all this money. It's like, wait, well, I could have just bought a book for that. Right?
I what I'm hearing when you say all that, Rosa, is that monetizing
Yeah.
todo lo que hacemos, desde like breathing is monetizing. Now everything like has become very monetized.
Mm,
And I know
yeah.
people might be like, oh, sovereignty, and you know, it needs to be reciprocal, and it needs to be, yeah, but you're right. Why does it have to cost $1,000 when we know sometimes Raza's not gonna pay $1,000
Right.
to go do a beautiful hike in the mountains,
Mm,
um, and have, I don't know, you know what, an experience when it's not equitable.
right.
It's not equitable. So yeah, shout out to, you know, all the amazing people that can monetize, and they're okay with it. But I do sit in the same feeling as you, as far as charging thousands of dollars for something that we can all do. And I think this is where I've been sitting with the part of somatic therapy, I think, per se. And I think that's where my countertransference sometimes comes out. I'm like, well, I'm gonna do somatic
Mm,
certification, and it's like 1,000 of. I'm like, thousands of something to get certified, right? But
Yeah.
then I'm like, I do somatic things every day. Like I like to dance. I like to hug myself. I like to, clean the frijoles. I'm still moving somatically, doing processing. I think the part where we charge is to tell people that they can do that
Right.
and how
Yeah.
to do it.
Yeah.
But the price tag to it is very exaggerated.
Yeah. 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 I know what you're talking about, especially I'm now going to talking more about continuing education, right? For therapists or social workers. Yeah. I mean, that's a whole other conversation, but yes, it's very expensive. And honestly, and I know there's a lot of talk, there's a lot of conversations around this issue is why is it so expensive to certify, quote unquote, for you to do a specific intervention that if you're a licensed mental health therapist, you can do. You don't need the certification permission of a organization. And most of the time, especially here in the States, is they're usually of a specific race and gender, and it's like, well, why do I need that person to certify me to be able to talk about, I don't know, X, Y, and Z in regards to trauma? No, like the information is there. I will definitely read a book about it. I could take a class. I can, but to pay thousands of dollars, I mean, just to, without pointing out any specific therapeutic approach, because I don't want to talk about a specific one, but just to give folks an idea, to do, okay, let's do EMD. Let's talk about EMDR, because a lot of people have gone through the EMDR training. So the EMDR training is actually on the lowest end of the spectrum, and that can, so to get certified as an EMDR therapist, you have to do a lot of hours of training. I think it's like 2 or 6 full days on separate weekends, and in between your practices there's several hours, and you have to certify your hours, not just classroom but practice. And then you have to pay to consult with someone, right? And it's about, oops,
Our ancestors are
okay.
probably like, what the hell are
Sorry
you
about that.
guys?
Yes. So for folks listening, the call just dropped out of nowhere. So we're back on. So I was talking about EMDR and how after you get trained, after all those hours, you still have to pay for a consultant, $200 an hour. And I think you need, like, I don't remember now. I think it's like 15 or 18 hours. Anyway, so it's a lot of money and time, right? The skill that you need to do EMDR, you can already, you could do it. You don't need to be certified, right? You don't need to pay $200 an hour for the next 18 sessions for someone to say you could do it. So that's my point, right? It's like, as mental health therapists, we can do these interventions, right? Because we have a license and ethics that we abide by, and when we practice under that, then we have a broad spectrum of interventions and tools that we can use. But I think there is just so much money that is being made with this, the certification process. So not only is it enough for you to get licensed, and you're in that process, as you shared earlier, that's a whole other ordeal that takes years of study and dedication and consistency. Then you get licensed, like, well, now you need all these certifications if you want to practice somatic therapy, or if you want to help someone with tics, or someone with OCD, and basically any diagnosis in the DSM, you would there will be a certification that you can do if you want to be considered an expert. So I think that's hard for our communities of color, right? Our therapists that are trying to help, doing working in the community, trying to help people. And and I'm sure when you're starting off as a mental health provider in community mental health, you're not going to be making as much money to be able to cover $5,000 worth of training, unless your employer covers it, right? So I don't know. I have a lot of obviously I have a lot of issues with that. And I'm sure you have a lot to say about that too.
I'm like always do. I think that from the get-go that I want one to begin with, Rosa, I did not want to become a therapist. I went to grad schools for my master's of social work, and through the entire time I was like, nope, nope, I don't want to be, why would I want to be a therapist? I just want to be a grassroots community worker, like be out there in the marcha, like that was that was my goal. But here we are. And I think it had a lot to do with I wasn't seeing a lot of clinicians that spoke my language or that in community. So one, I think that's what ignited me to be in this camino. But yes, it's costly. And something that came to my mind right now that you're talking about certifications was, do you think that's why in the Western world it has become, oh, well, I can get a certification to be a curandera. I can get a certification to be a curandero.
Yes, absolutely.
And
Yeah.
it's I had this joke with some of my compañeras,
Yeah.
one of my compañeras from danza. I told her, so when do I get to call my danzante? When do I get to call myself a danzante? When do I get the certification? And she's like, Maria, stop. I'm like, no, seriously, like, can I get a
Yeah.
certificate that says like curandera, danzante level 1? And she's like, no.
Yeah. You are so right about that. I think it does. I think it does have to do with the fact that we think that we could, we take a class and then we know how to do it, so then we can share with others. But I feel like maybe for something that is very technical, skill based, yeah, you could do that. But I also think that when you're dealing with matters of spirit, soul, trauma, especially trauma, and how the intersectionality of all of that, I have a hard time with folks that just, take a class and then they want to start doing limpias. Like I don't know if I guess to each
I'm
their own.
laughing, yes.
I wouldn't go with, I would, personally, for my own journey, I like to look for folks that I feel have been doing it for a while, that have the capacity and the skills based on what I know of them to hold space for me ultimately, right? I don't know. It just makes me feel more at ease, safer, in that sense, to know that I'm in good hands. For me, it is about experience, and it is about their commitment to this, because it is not an easy journey. I don't think it is. I'm not a curandera. I'm not a healer in that regard. Um, but the few people that I've known, it is not an easy journey to navigate. It is not something that you can just say, yeah, like, I don't know, like, this is what I'm living the dream. Maybe they are, but it's almost like it comes with a lot of difficulties in many ways. And it's almost like, well, why am I doing this? Why did I get caught? That's more of the question that I hear. It's like, I don't know, but there's something about this that is, I'm here, and it's hard. That's more of the story that I hear. And so, my heart and the kudos and goes to those folks that are committed to doing that healing work, because when you're dealing with spirit, like I said, that it's not easy. Right?
Yes, you're right. And you said every single word that I can think of. When you choose to walk the red road, or you choose to walk the camino rojo, or whatever it is that they call it, I've learned it as the red road, or the camino de aprendizaje. Um, it is not pretty. It is not glamorized, and it's not on social media all the time. Period.
Yes. Oh my God, can we talk about that? It's not
Period.
on social media. You will not see it because there's nothing to show. How can you show what you're going through emotionally and mentally, that the darkness that you experience? You can't even capture it in pictures or in image, maybe words, right? You can share your story, but I find that most folks don't, right? It's such a personal, intimate journey that you just shared with those close to you.
Yeah, and imagine me telling, like, if I am not a curandera, that is not my goal, that's not where I'm heading. Don't call myself that. I'm not practicing under anybody. Um, I've been around very amazing mujeres that do identify as that. Um, but I always say I tell when I'm imagine if you were to someone comes to you and you're doing your limpa and you're like, can I just take a picture so I can put it in the gram? I will cover your face, but I'm gonna put it on the gram. What would that feel like? She's like, it's not valid. They come to me because they trust me. Why would I put it on the gram? Why would I put that so and so? She's like, do you put your client's picture on the gram after you see them? And I'm like, no, because I have ethics. And she's like, well, so do I. I have ethics. My ethics might not come down from the BBS like
Mm-hmm.
you, but I have etica. And so
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to post about what I do. Yes, I post about other nature things I do, but I'm not gonna post that. Clients or gente come to me for other support. And I was like, oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that makes total sense. Like we don't share about our clients as in our career, in our field. Why would others in energy that are doing energy work or healing work? Yeah, no, absolutely. And but that's the reality of the world that we navigate. And I just want to encourage folks to just be careful who you give your money to, right? Your hard-earned money. um, I have somebody that I know personally that they were, and see, this is the thing. Most of the time, when folks are willing to pay whatever they need, is because they're hurting, right? And they want the pain to go away, and they want to just make it go away. And then there's people that promise, right, that okay, well, we'll make it go away, and we'll do X, Y, and Z, and of course it doesn't always it doesn't work that way, right? You can't just pay money for pain to go away. Like that's not how it works. I always, as a therapist, I wish I had a magic wand and it could just make it all go away, but we
Yes.
don't, right? But anyways, this person that I know, they ended up, I think they were going through a breakup, a very difficult breakup. They were going through that loss. They wanted this person back. And with I think it was within a few months of the breakup, they came across someone on social media that said they can do some kind of energy, or like it sounded more like brujeria, but they could do something, right? Some kind of ritual to bring this person back to them. And but the crazy part is that it was going to cost them, I don't remember if it was 8,000 or $10,000.
Dang. Dang,
It's
dang,
so
dang.
that I'm bringing this up because it's an extreme example, but people pay when they're hurting in that way. So this person, and she's not a client, by the way, so I'm not sharing. I don't share my client stories. This is not a client. This is someone that I know. Yeah, and so they paid. They paid whatever the amount was, and yeah, they got ripped off. And of course, this person, their ex, didn't come back to them, and then they have that to deal with, right? The financial trauma of this event on top of the pain, the emotional pain that they were already in. So what I mean is that just be careful who you give your money. Even, I don't know, even $50. It's a lot for it. Make sure you know what you're getting in exchange and that it feels right and fair to you,
And you're
whatever it
right.
is, right? Whatever program or system, with whatever the amount is, the exchange, it needs. And I feel like if you sit with it for a bit, you'll know. You're like, okay, is this fair? Is this does this make sense?
Yes, 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 yes. And
Yeah.
ask. And it's okay to ask. I sometimes have the curiosity of like, so who'd you learn this from? Or, that question always like, who are your maestros, maestras, or maestres, or does this come in your family? Like, when did you begin to practice this? And if they tell me like, oh, I've been doing for the last 3 years, and I'm like, okay, bye. Because I'm like, 3 years. I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't.
I don't, yeah. Like, I don't know if that's enough.
I mean,
I've been trying to heal myself for how long?
like, girl, don't. That's another conversation.
Yeah,
And
I'm
then,
still trying to heal myself for the last 30 years, and here I am.
yeah, yeah, and I think, and even then, I always teach the students that I work with, like,
Yeah.
you can ask me if I see a therapist. I think I'm now going into a different route. Like, I asked that when I started therapy, like, do you go to therapy? Because I also want to know that my person that is helping me heal is getting supported. Because I think
Yeah.
that's, como se dice, that's like a beautiful hygiene of energy. Like, we're
Yeah.
we're on that same wavelength. Like, it's not
Yeah.
just, I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because it's almost like that it shows that they're still working on themselves, and you can see that. You can see when someone has done their own work. You can feel it, I should say, when they've done their own work and they're ready to share with others. And it doesn't mean that you have to be completely I don't know, healed and ascended or anything like that, right?
Girl,
Uh,
I always say
but
Jesus is never going to be done working on me. So who knows?
no, absolutely not. And I think that it's important, as mental health therapists to talk about that, because I'm, very much still on my journey, and I've shared this a lot on the podcast and also with people that know me, is that, I'm I don't know. I think I'm always going to be on this journey because I'm ever evolving and changing, and now I became a new mom 3 years ago, and then if I have another child, I don't know what that's like, right? When I'm 50 or 60, I don't know what that's going to be like. I don't know what it is to have an adult child, right? With difficulty. I don't, so there's all these stages that I'm yet to experience. And with each stage, there will be challenges, there will be triggers, there will be things that I thought I had worked through, and maybe I did, but from a different angle. And now it's being presented to me to deal with it in a whole different way, right? Or even the loss of a parent, or all these things that are just part of being human. And when we have trauma and we have difficulties that we had to work through, these human experiences will inevitably bring us more opportunities to heal. So I think that we're always on this journey. So like you said, when I go to someone, yeah, I want to make sure that they're also taking care of themselves, that they're also working on their own involvement, because if not, then I think that says something, right, in terms of the openness and the experience and the capacity to hold space for others. Because I don't know, I feel like I have a lot to bring, so you need to be prepared for to help me, because I'm a lot.
No, it's like, but it's true. You want to, I always say in this field, if you're choosing to
Yeah.
come into the world of mental health, of healing, of whatever we want to call it nowadays, you better be doing the work too. Do not be selling a service and you've never done the work, because that's not cool. Yeah, that's not cool.
Right. Absolutely. No, definitely. Um, yeah. So, oh my God, Maria, I just realized almost 10 p.m. Oh my God, yeah.
Oh,
So, but yes, so I'm
thank you,
telling you, we can
Rosa.
talk forever. We need to have
I
a
know.
comadre session part two
Yes, yes,
with you.
yes. It's all the topics. I think before we take off, I want to say this for you, Rosa. Maybe you will not identify as a curandera, but I think with your platform and you communicating with so many different types of people in the healing community, you are the connecting to bringing that information out. You're bringing the cuentos, you're bringing the awareness, so that in this lifetime, maybe that is the role that you have, is to put those healing journeys of the providers out, and to share that they have a story and that they are showing up and how it's working. Like, that's your component, I would say.
Oh, thank you. That means a lot, Maria. Thank you. 'Cause I know you're very intuitive, and I know that,
Mm.
I've shared with you. So your words mean a lot. Thank you. Thank you. And,
Oh, sure,
and I think
Rosa.
I've shared a little bit with you over the last couple of years, and just trying to figure out how do I want to share what am I really, what am I doing, right? And the
Girl,
social
that's always my
social media
question.
arena. Like,
That's an
what am I doing
everyday
here?
question. Yes, that's an everyday question. I go on and off, on and off, on and off. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, and one thing that we talked about yesterday, or we that we you and I shared about, maybe we can talk about this. You brought up the topic of um like friendship wound,
Oh,
or
yes,
like the amiga wound. You
yes.
didn't call it that. You said,
But that's kind of what it
what
is,
did you
girl. Just
what did you
say
say, like, like the message that we get from our moms
it.
about
No hay
friendship.
amigas. No hay
Right.
amigas.
No hay amigas, right? And so
Yeah.
sometimes when you find someone, for me, I'm talking about myself, when I find someone like you that is so genuine, so supportive, and uh so smart and so wise,
Thank you, Rosa.
I really treasure it.
Thank you.
Because
And
I,
you know,
like you said, it's like this. I also grew up with what you shared, your mom, your mom would say. I grew up with my mom saying the same thing, like, how does she say it? She would say something like, no hay una amiga de verdad.
oh, yes,
Todas son amigas falsas.
yes,
You know that?
yeah.
I
Oh,
know.
oh,
Oh my God.
yes.
Did your mom say
Yes, but
something like
now,
that?
yes, Rosa, but now I understand, like, that was her wounding too. Like, that was
Mm,
maybe what she heard. And I think her growing up and getting married like at the age of 17, and never built community. She had to build community with the family that she knew. And when the people say like ride or die with my family, but sometimes family is not ride or die. So I don't think she ever really built amigas. So then I grew up with that message, like, no hay amigas. And I was like, but I do want to have friends. Yeah. And so yeah, friendship is important for me. I think I navigate that sometimes too hard, and try not to put expectation, just meet people where they're at. And sometimes that's even hard because
yeah, no, absolutely. And not to keep, taking up more time, but I what you just shared brought the idea of la envidia. And my mom would always tell us, like, oh, like, you have to be careful with what you share with certain people, because some, they're envidiosas, they envy, and then that's not good energy for you. And so that was part of my own wounding, I should say, when it comes to sharing and opening up to people, is that message from my mom, was saying that don't tell people too much, because the envy is real, and it's going to get you.
and here we are talking on a podcast about all the things you're not supposed to
Right?
talk
Is it,
about.
the irony? And now you're out telling everybody.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That it's
Yes.
you got to decide to make that shift, just like I get to decide to make that
Yeah,
shift.
thank you for that reminder. That's absolutely true. We have the capacity to choose otherwise. Yeah.
Thank you, Rosa.
Thank you for agreeing to do this platica comadre session with me.
Oh,
I love it, and I think we should do like a part two and talk
yeah,
about.
I'm down.
I love, going back to Morras Malditas. I love their banter, right? When they sharing scary stories. I was
Yes.
like, I want to have somebody to talk scary stories to, or
Girl,
about and share stories of my abuelitas.
I'm like, I have some stuff, and I know I can, I can always go to my dad, and he always has something. And I always tell him, ¿por qué a usted siempre le pasaban
Yeah.
las cosas? He's like, no sé, no sé. There's always an historia.
That is so funny. Yeah, same. We should do that and give some competition to Morras Malditas.
Oh God. Hey, our version, that'd be dope. What is that? What does that look
Oh my
like?
god.
Yeah. Because
Yes.
if you notice, sometimes
Uh-huh.
it's the same leyenda, but like it happens differently.
Honestly, I feel that it is like a repetition of stories with very similar themes. And when I'm listening to some of them, I'm like, oh, yeah, my grandma said that one too.
Yes,
Like, oh,
yes,
my, what that told me something like, yeah, it's interesting. So, for the folks listening, we're talking about a podcast from Mexico. It's two girls. They look like they're young. They're probably in their 20s, and their podcast is all about just collecting stories from their listeners about what happened to them, scary supernatural stories of ghosts and spirits, and it's interesting. But for some reason it doesn't feel too heavy and dark. There's no gore to it, right? I don't know, that's kind of how I feel. It's not,
no,
it's
it's
very, because like you said, it's folk stories, right? Folklore
yes,
and leyendas, and it's just
like
there's
the one, yes,
something that feels very familiar and but at the same time interesting and fascinating and creepy, but I don't know, but in a dark way. I don't
yeah,
know. What do you
no,
say?
yeah, yes, it's not like I guess I'm thinking it's like that Chainsaw Massacre type of vibes. It's more
No,
like
no, nothing like that. No.
no, it's more like, oh, que le jalaron los pies, and the,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
corner there was like the niño that was looking at
yeah.
you.
Okay,
That's
había dinero enterrado, right? There's
yes,
money
yes,
hidden in the house, and the ghosts were protecting the money. Yeah,
yes,
it's interesting. So it's in Spanish only, and it's called Morras Malditas, and the episodes are like an hour and a half, 2 hours. So it's the perfect thing to listen to when you want to just get
yes,
distracted. So, anyways,
yes.
they're they don't know me at all, but I'm just promoting their podcast here
It's okay. Hey, you
because I
never
love
know,
it.
Rosa. You never know.
Oh my goodness. Well, Maria, this was lovely. Thank you
Oh,
so
likewise.
much. And I will talk to you soon.
Yes, thank you, Rosa.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope that you found it healing and nourishing to your mind and soul. If there's a friend that you think would benefit from listening to this information, please share it. Share about our podcast. If you feel called to, please leave us a review, as this really, really helps boost our presence here in Apple Podcasts, and it makes it easier for others to find us. To stay up to date on new episode releases and special events and projects that I'm working on, you can follow us on Instagram at Inner Healing Paths Podcast. And you can subscribe to my newsletter by going to my website, which is rosachetty.lcsw.com. And I will include this information and links in the show notes. Once again, thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to sharing with you again next time.